We're almost through Lent. In 2 weeks is Easter Sunday. Next week, obviously, would be Palm Sunday. Now, every church right now is following the story of Jesus going into Jerusalem leading up to the trial and the crucifixion. Every church is following that. Today is when Jesus has dinner at Lazarus' house and Mary washes his feet with the expensive perfume. That's pretty much what every church, I think, across the world is covering right now. I tried really hard to try and come up with something new, something that hasn't been heard before regarding the washing of the feet. I couldn't. I tried. And I was getting frustrated. And after a lot of frustration, bordering on anger, I finally, prayed. I said, God, what do you want me to talk about in this? All right, 2020 hindsight, I should have started with that. I should have asked first, but we're all stubborn. So today I want to talk about the two biggest sinners in the New Testament. And what better time to talk about two of the biggest sinners in the New Testament than at Easter time, when Jesus came, died on the cross for our sins. Now, the two sinners I'm talking about, of course, are Matthew, the disciple, and the Apostle Paul. Now, I want to start with Matthew, probably because, his is the first book in the New Testament. All right, we all know Matthew was a tax collector. Okay, we all know in the Bible tax collectors were not nice people. They were not, who people everybody liked. But it doesn't go much further than that, just that tax collectors were unfair. Now, okay, a little bit of background on why tax collectors were considered so bad. All right, under Roman law, a tax collector would pay Rome up front. Rome would say, we're guessing it's going to be this much in tax from, the merchants, the travelers, the everything. So this is how much it's going to be. Pay us. Then the tax collector would go out and try and, reimburse themselves for what they had just paid Rome. Now, where this gets interesting, Rome had their tax. They didn't care anymore what the tax collectors did. In fact, tax collectors could do anything they wanted, and their actions were covered under Roman law. No one could say or do anything to protest what a tax collector said you have to pay. So, let's take, for example, a sheep. Rome says a sheep is worth one sheep is worth $1 in tax. Okay, so the tax collector, all right, be 100 sheep, whatever, $100. Now, when they're out there on the street, they can do whatever they want, and whatever they want is backed by Roman law. So they're going to charge you $5 tax for that sheep. Okay, they've reimbursed themselves the $1. Now they've just pocketed $4. But it goes even deeper. Say you're coming through, but you've known whoever the tax collector is for quite a while. They've been to your house for dinner. They're going to charge you $1.50. The guy right behind you, they got into an argument one time. Guess what? Your sheep is now $7 in tax. And even though the guy paying $7 just heard that you're paying $1.50, there's nothing the guy who's forced to pay $7 can do about it. This is why tax collectors had become known as corrupt and just absolutely horrid, nasty, scum of life people. Okay, Matthew was no different. He was a tax collector. Don't Don't even fool yourself into thinking Matthew had some sort of morality in his job. Jesus did not pick him because Matthew showed some kind of moral code. Matthew was just as much of a liar, a cheat, and a swindler as any other tax collector. But yet, Matthew never batted an eye. Jesus walked up and said, "Follow me." Matthew just got up from his table and followed him. No questions asked. Now, it's not known if Jesus changed Matthew's name, like, Jesus changed Simon's to Peter, or if Matthew changed his name. But as a tax collector, Matthew was known as Levi. And Matthew, whether Jesus changed it or Matthew changed it himself, Matthew is actually the shortened translated of Mattathias, which means gift of Yahweh or gift of God. So now the question is, how does the lowest scum of scum, a tax collector, become known as the gift of God? The simple answer is God's grace. When Jesus told Matthew, "Follow me," and Matthew didn't even question it, the worst of the worst had his heart instantly changed. It changed to the point his writings are the first book we read in the New Testament. Next up is the Apostle Paul, or Saul, as he was known before God changed his life. Saul, or Paul. Here's a man who needed Jesus, let me tell you. Okay, this man literally led Roman soldiers to where Christians were, to either have them thrown in jail or outright slaughtered. He led them to them. It's not like, he stumbled upon a small group and then went and tattled on them. No, he seeked them out with Roman soldiers in tow. And to make this even worse, he was proud of his work. He was proud of leading soldiers to where the Christians were. He was even a witness, not sure if he partook, but didn't stop the stoning death of the disciple Stephen. He did nothing to stop it. Saul, or Paul, believed it was his calling. What he was supposed to do is to rid the world of Christians. Now, the story, Paul losing his sight, well documented. On way to Damascus, struck by a blinding light. Now, we all know that story, so I'm not going to delve into that. That's not what we're discussing. Okay, we also know Paul was blind for 3 days. I'm going to give a little side note here. You notice how many things in the Bible take 3 days? Jonah, 3 days in the belly of the whale. Paul, blind for 3 days. It's almost like everything revolves around the 3 days before Jesus' resurrection, doesn't it? I could do an entire sermon, an entire series on the symbolism of 3, but that's for another day. Okay. After 3 days, God finally had Paul's attention. So God sends a disciple from the city of Damascus named Ananias. Ananias, God got a hold of Ananias, told him, "I need you to go do this." Ananias says, "Wait a minute, you know who this guy is?" God says, "Yes, I know who this guy is. Go do it anyway." Now let's look at this for just a second here. Okay, Saul, or Paul, he was still Saul at this time. The man who hunted down Christians, men, women, children, he didn't care. Hunted them down to have them jailed or slaughtered. And God sends a Christian to heal his blindness. Tell me God does not have a sense of humor. Okay, now the Bible goes on, scales fell from his eyes, all that. But, okay, after Paul regained his sight, this man went on to become one of God's most vocal messengers. He wound up writing 7 books in the New Testament. 7. Now, when I'm talking about this, kind of giving a little background and referring to these two, Matthew and Paul are proof God can take the absolute lowest of the low, the scum of the scum, and totally change them to be a great witness. So now I'm asking you, do you, we, me, turn our noses up at people with a questionable, sordid past? Do we give anyone the time of day who is trying to witness if they've been in jail? We know they're a former drug user, has a criminal record. Do we even listen to them then? Let's go a little more personal. Do you question God's call to you to be a witness because of your own past? Now, let me ask you a question. If God can redeem, completely change, and make great messengers out of Matthew and Paul, 2 massive sinners, why couldn't he do the same for you? Why just Matthew and Paul? The simple answer with that is he doesn't. If God can change Matthew and Paul, 2 huge sinners, you know he can change you. He can change me. He can change that guy on the street. We know. Now, we read the book of Matthew. We read any of the 7 books Paul wrote, be it Romans, but we read those knowing what their past was, but can revel in the words they're saying now. Can revel in what the words they put down in print after God changed them. Knowing what they did. But yet still judge ourselves or others, forgetting that if God can redeem Matthew and Paul, he can redeem anyone. We cannot escape the sin of this world. We can't. It's out there. You walk out that front door, you don't even have to walk out the door. Turn on your TV. Watch the 6 o'clock news. The evil of the world is there. We cannot escape this sin. So why are we judging or condemning others for their sins? Paul understood that sin is in us. Even born again Christians. It's there. We can't escape it. In fact, Paul considered himself the king of sinners. But if we can read Paul's letters, if we can read the book of Matthew and overlook their past and read what they're saying now, why do we turn our noses up at ourselves or others if we don't feel they're good witnesses? So as Easter is quickly approaching and we remember the sacrifice Jesus made on the cross for all sinners, let's make it our goal, make it a point to try and open our eyes more, to see that, okay, yeah, this person this person has a past. This person, has done things I don't like. But good Lord, look at them now. Look at what God has done to them now. Are you a Matthew? A Paul? I'd hope not. I'd hope you're not out swindling and stealing from people. I really hope you're not out having Christians jailed or slaughtered. We have our own sins, though. Just remember, Jesus didn't just die on the cross for me. He didn't just die on the cross for you. He died for the sins of every man, woman, and child, before, during, and forever after. Jesus came and died on that cross because we are all sinners. But because of that cross, all sins and sinners can be forgiven and redeemed. Not just me or you or Matthew or Paul or our best friend. All. We just need to open our hearts. Allow God to not only change us and our past, but to open our eyes to seeing who He has changed. So as Easter's quickly approaching, and we celebrate Jesus' resurrection and His sacrifice and death on the cross for all our sins, let's focus on the word all. Not just hit and miss, not just certain people. And let's look past people's pasts, see what God has made them into today.